New reporting from the New York Times is taking a look at Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao's connections to China through her family's business. Chow's family runs the U.S.-based Foremost Group, a shipping company with a large presence in China. While Secretary Chow has no formal affiliation with her family's business, the Times notes that she has used her profile to help it. The Times also notes the Foremost Group has benefited from, quote, expansive industrial policies in Beijing that are at the heart of diplomatic tensions with the United States. Eric Lipton is one of the authors of that piece. He's an investigative reporter for the New York Times and joins me now from Washington. Eric, thanks for being with us. This is such a deeply reported piece. First of all, you write about requests from Secretary Chow raising ethics questions with American officials in Beijing ahead of an October 2017 visit. What were some of their concerns?
What the situation was is that Elaine Chao was planning to go to Beijing, and her staff had communicated with State Department officials who were in charge of actually arranging the meetings with the top government officials in China. And in those conversations, they were discussing the possibility of having perhaps her sister, Angela Chow, or perhaps her father, James Chow. Angela Chow is the head executive at Foremost Group. James Chow founded the company and until 2018 was its top executive. And there was discussions of having them participate in some of the meetings with the Chinese government officials. This is at the same time that Foremost Group has, 10 ships on order in Shanghai and had a $300 million commitment from the government of China to help finance the construction of some of those ships. So, her family participating in meetings with Chinese government officials could help boost their standing with the Chinese government as it continues to do business in China. And the shipyard in Shanghai where these 10 ships are being built for the Chow family is government-owned facility. So it's a massive, government-subsidized facility there in Shanghai.
Well, 2017 was not the first time Chow's family connections to China raised concerns. What more can you tell us about that?
Dating back a couple of decades, Elaine Chao has, and through her family, frequently visited China and helped them launch the introduction of a number of the ships that the company has built. It's built more ships in China than anywhere else. Again, to some extent, not surprising because China is one of the biggest shipbuilding nations in the world. But Elaine Chao, she had served in the cabinet of the labor secretary in the prior Bush administration. And at one point, she brought her father to a meeting, James Chow, when he was an executive at Foremost Group, to a meeting with Chinese government officials associated with the Olympics. And so that showed up in the State Department cables that were released that we saw. And again, he is the top executive at a company that has business in China. She was then in the cabinet of the United States, and she has her father present with her in a company that does business with the state of, the government of China. So it's raised some questions about, if your family member wants to get access to a top-level official in China, it would be beneficial if you're a member of the cabinet in the United States.
And context is so significant here. Walk us through the relationship between the Chinese government and the shipping business owned by Secretary Chow's family, the Foremost Group.
Well, unlike in the United States, for example, in Shanghai, the shipyard where these 10 ships are on order are actually being built for the Foremost company. That's a shipyard that is owned by the government of China. It is also massively subsidized by the government of China. They help pay the cost of the equipment, of the labor. And so any ship that's built there to some extent is being subsidized by the government of China. So Therefore, the thing that is just sort of interesting on its face to us, and the reason that we spent a fair amount of time on this story, was that she is the Secretary of Transportation in the United States. One of the responsibilities that she has is to oversee maritime policy in the United States. The Department of Transportation has a division called MARAD, which is, helps fund the American flag ships and ports construction in the United States. So she, at the same time as she is essentially helping run maritime policy in the United States, her sister and her father are deeply engaged with China and their maritime policy. And so, you have one family that is in the middle of, the two rival nations and in a very important industry, which is the maritime industry. the industrial policy of nations is affected in a major way by the ships and their ability to move goods. Iron ore in massive quantities is being carried to China by the foremost company's ships to help fuel their steel production. At the same time as the Trump administration is challenging the steel production as apparently, flooding the United States market with low-cost steel. But the Chow family is actually involved in bringing the raw materials for that steel into China.
And your reporting also mentions how during her confirmation hearing in 2017, Elaine Chao discussed her commitment to U.S. maritime interests, but you note how the Trump administration has proposed budget cuts to programs supporting the U.S. shipbuilding industry. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's sort of interesting, again, this kind of disconnect between her family as they're building ships, with the subsidized by the Chinese government, and back in the United States, she's running an agency that is actually proposing to cut funding to help, the small shipyard program, a loan guarantee program, a program that was going to build new ships for the maritime academies of the United States because they have these really old ships that break down frequently. And instead of buying a whole fleet of new ships that would train generations worth of future mariners in the United States, the Transportation Department during Chow's tenure decided to buy used ships, which was strongly criticized by members of Congress. Congress rejected that idea. One member of Congress mocked the Department of Transportation, saying that they wanted to buy rusty buckets for the maritime academies of the United States. And so, the Department of Transportation during her tenure, to some extent forced by the White House and the Office of Management and Budget, has repeatedly proposed cuts in spending at the Department of Transportation for maritime programs. And, again, it's interesting because at the same time, her family's engaged in helping build up the maritime program in China.
Well, what has been the response to your reporting from the Transportation Department?
They think the story was unfair, and they think that there is no linkage at all between her responsibilities as the head of DOT and the MARAD program through DOT and her family's business in China. Also the foremost company, run by her sister Angela, feels as if that while their ships do go to China a fair amount, that they are essentially a taxi company because they charter out their ships, and so they don't even make decisions about where their ships go. And they also say that a relatively small amount of their financing has come from the Chinese state Import-Export Bank, which is subsidizing the cost of the construction of their ships. So they think the story was unfair, but the story was, got a lot of attention in Washington today. It was, there were people from the conservative side, from the liberal side, who thought this was an important examination of, a potential conflict of interest, potentially another area of conflict of interest within the Trump administration.
Certainly a lot of questions raised by your reporting. Eric Lipton, thanks very much for your time, Eric.
Thank you.